Hello and welcome. This is Social Studies, Voices Across America. I'm Bill Wood.
And I am Peter Goldsmith.
Today, Peter, we're talking about power, good old American political power. It's the basis for all things American, and maybe the only thing that tops racism as America's unresolved issue. Peter, as we're doing this, America is caught up in 2 weeks of sometimes ugly protests.
Yes, Bill, we're living through a very historical time at this point. We've got a pandemic, which is worldwide, which we're slowly grinding through, and hopefully the end is sort of in sight. We don't know, but we hope so. And in the last few weeks, spurred by an incident, which is either the tipping point or the straw that broke the camel's back, was the murder of a black man in Minneapolis, Minnesota, by a white police officer in a very disrespectful and ugly way. And it brought people out into the streets again, protesting, rioting, and looting. And I say those three things because they're very different, but I think we'll get into them as we go along. But yes, Bill, we are going to talk about power. And you brought up to me the other day as we were kind of rehearsing for this, your feeling was that racism was a tool of the powerful to keep the powerless down.
I firmly believe that, Peter, and the more that I've thought about it in the last month or so, the more I understand it better. Especially when you look back, I've seen a couple of documentaries and read some reports, the McCone Commission, the Kerner Commission, the Christopher Commission. All of them said practically the same thing when it deals with how law enforcement relates to the community, how they don't take it seriously. The community and the law enforcement are separate, two separate Americas. And this has been going on since the middle 60s. And now at 2020, that's what, my math is bad, but let's say it's more than 50 years. Nothing has changed. In fact, I wrote a piece that said that the income gap between blacks and whites was like twice in 1960, and now it's almost 10 times. That means after 50 years of integration, we're 500% the opposite direction. Something's wrong, and we cannot allow the people in power to stir the pot with this racism thing and say that's what's wrong with America. That's not what's wrong with America. America's about power. Even the national anthem talks about power and how a piece of laundry survived war. Everything at basis of America is power, and it's not racism. Power makes racism, but racism doesn't make power.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, Bill. What we do in this country is we have a system, a capitalist system, which is based upon 20 to 30% of the people doing okay, 10% doing wonderfully, 20% doing pretty good, which we are probably in, and 50% people getting screwed. And I think those at the top of the food chain here, I think a perfect analogy was, I hate to say it like this, but I mean it, the knee on the neck of a person of color, in this case a black man, was a perfect analogy of what the top of the food chain does to those underneath. They allow 20 to 30% of us to have a good life, and we certainly have nothing to complain about. But then we look behind us and see another 50% who are not entitled to anything according to what goes on in this country. And I think it's more than the last 50 or 60 years. I think the entire system is built on this. I think we're seeing it now because, as another analogy, the Chinese believe in the yin and the yang. We've all heard those terms. And the term is when yang, which is the masculine, the forceful, goes all the way to yin, it becomes yin, which is the feminine, the receptive, and that goes all the way around as well. I think we've gotten so yang here with the government that we're dealing with now. I think it is the most divisive government we've ever had, at least in my life. And I'm, as you know, I'm well into my 8th decade. I like to put it like that. It's in my 70s, but it's my 8th decade. This government is just terrible. It's just flat out terrible. The divisiveness, the meanness, the rudeness, the uncompromisingness has all left people with the feeling that it's okay to take care of me and no one else and screw them. It's an insecurity that someone's going to sneak up on me and take what's mine, and I'm not going to give it up. And in most cases, it's the people who are the backbone of this country, labor.
And as long as the 50% and maybe the extra 20 that you're saying that we're a part of, as long as everyone is talking about something else, racism, police, law enforcement, abuse of power, as long as everybody's talking about that, they aren't talking about the real power in America has always been told to us is voting, where the citizen has the power. If you don't like the way that the country is going, you can vote for change. And that's the one thing that the citizen has the right and the power to do, as long as those in power don't try to suppress the vote of the citizens in one way or another. If we refuse to vote, and so many people that I know think voting doesn't matter, except for one vote on the Supreme Court, Al Gore would have been president of the United States and not G.W. Bush. Votes in every place matter in America. And if we don't participate in the voting process, register, learn what the issues are, vote according to the issues and not what the powerful tell you how to vote, when the Democrats and Republicans send out lists of who to vote for, and you just check the box, I'm a Democrat, I always vote Democrat. You have to know what the issues are, and you have to vote. That's our power. And if that power is taken away from us, then somebody else is telling us how to think and what to do.
And I'll tell you something that's very interesting. I grew up in the 60s, as you did as well. We had a group called the Black Panther Party, and one of the slogans of the Black Panther Party was all power to all the people. And we shot our fists in the air, we white guys who were not in the Black Panther Party. And we identify with the Black Panther Party for a lot of reasons. But metaphorically, I think they're a very important part of the culture of the United States of America. And here's what I mean. To those who were against them, they were a radical terrorist organization because they were armed. They refused to allow the police to come into their neighborhoods and continually beat and abuse Black people as they had for years with no recourse. Okay, I'm not talking about today because it sounds like today, but it's 55 years ago.
Yeah, as long as we're talking about that one thing, it's not going to change. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, but you're right. But
it's not going to change if our mindset is always on racism and police abuse of power.
Yeah, and the idea is to go where you just came from. The idea basically is, if you had done your research, if you had looked into who those people were, they were community organizers. They had breakfast and lunch and after-school programs for poor kids. They took care of seniors. They took people to hospitals who couldn't get to hospitals. They did those kinds of things. They created a base in their own communities. And that's what we need to begin to do now, is to build bases in our own communities. You know, racism exists. We know that that's not an issue for us to talk about. Any American who has lived through the last 30 or 50 or 60 or 80 years knows that. But what we need to do is to bring people together in a class way. I'm not going to start preaching Marxism here, but I'm going to tell you that power comes from all power comes from the muzzle of a gun, Mao Zedong. Okay. And that's what the police are used for, to preserve the power that the power elite have, to put down those who would dare to disagree with the powers that be. And we've had this all the way through. You know, we've had whistleblowers. I think about Edward Snowden, vilified by the powers that be, until you personally, not you, Bill, but you with a capital Y, all of us, do the research and see what this guy did and how he has created a culture that doesn't believe and trust in the government unless they can prove it to us through facts. So we've known these things, but there it was. And there's 100 examples of this. And the idea here for me is, and we've been hearing a lot of rhetoric, and I'll tell you what I really like. And you and I talked about this on other podcasts, but I really like this. You're hearing young men and women speak. In the last few weeks, of course, you've heard a lot of athletes and celebrities come out. Primarily, they're Black Americans, white ones too, but primarily Black. And everyone that I have heard has said, Black and white, we need to, so forth and so on. This is something we need to listen very closely to, because, like, as white people, we need to step up. Black people have been yelling and screaming about this forever, the same way women did with rape. You know, guess what? That crime is a crime of power, not a crime of sex. We as men need to step up and say to other men, no, that doesn't go. We don't accept that. It's the same thing with racism. We need to stand behind each other, whatever color or gender or transgender we are. Doesn't matter. We need to stand up for each other and speak, and I hate to use this term, but it's one of my favorite terms, speak truth to power, because that's what we need in this country right now. We need to keep what's going on right now, our raising of our social consciousness. We need to keep it raising, and we need to keep staying active and forget about the rhetoric and concentrate on the action. Rhetoric is important, very important, but the action speaks louder than the rhetoric.
It dawned on me the other day when I was out walking. It came to mind that the terrorist organization Hezbollah, they were an umbrella organization for Shia Muslims who were, it was put together to cover a lot of different groups during in the 80s, the Lebanese war in the late 80s, Iran and Syria, put it together. Hezbollah was a terrorist organization, just maybe short of the violence of ISIS that everybody hated, a few years ago. Hezbollah had a political wing, and that political wing is now one of the major political parties in the Lebanese government. They have a seat at the table. They're having a part to play in what the Lebanese government is doing or going to do. I'm not saying that anything about Hezbollah. I don't know what they believe. I do know that some Christian organizations and some Christian citizens are backing Hezbollah, a Muslim organization. So they must have changed a little bit of their rhetoric. But the point is that the power of the vote is what got them a seat at the table and allowed them to be a part of what's going on. I heard a woman on CNN this morning. At first, it hit me that she was saying that the people who are protesting are waiting to see what the two sides in the election are going to do about racism and political police abuse of power. And I thought about it, and I said, wait a minute. That's not power. That's not powerful. That's not leading to power. You're waiting for somebody to drop crumbs off the table and allow you to eat. You're not pulling a seat up to the table and eating. You have to, in every side of the argument, you have to exercise whatever power you have to participate, in particular, in the American political landscape. You can't allow somebody else to give you what they have left over, the set aside. You've got to go in there and demand your rights as a citizen. And the basic way we do that is through the vote.
I think there's a Buddhist thing. I don't know very much about Buddhism, but I think it's you be the change, I think is the thing. Be the change. Maybe it's Ram Dass or somebody else. I don't know. We have a thing, and you and I are TV veterans, and if anyone's going to put the word prostitute to us, they might be close to right in our TV days. We're too old for that now. But we had a thing which was a call to action. We called it a call to action. What do you want the audience to do? What's the call to action? I think now we need a call to continual action. What can people do now when they're listening to this? What can they do to keep the line moving forward? Of course, vote. Look at who you're voting for. Look at the record of some of the people who will be running. I'm not even going to go into any further than that. I'm just going to leave it at that. Some of these people are despicable. We had an election down here where I live in North Carolina. And a buddy of mine's wife was on the electoral, what do you call it, the committee for elections, so and so. And she said, who are you going to vote for? And I said, well, I know this person and that person. I don't know the other 3 or 4 people. She said, oh, but do you know all the issues? I said, well, not really. She goes, well, you should call the Board of Elections. That's what she was, Board of Elections, and they'll give you all the information. So they have that. So wherever you are, call the Board of Elections and ask the people, I want to know more about this candidate. And, a lot of these candidates now, and I don't know if it's a rule or something, but when I go by, near an election where I live out in the country, everybody's got these little things stuck in the ground. Vote for Harvey, vote for Mary, vote for whoever it is. But it doesn't say if they're a Democrat or Republican, because the Democrats don't want you to know that, you know what I mean? And the Republicans don't want you to know. Okay, my point being, you can vote Democrat, doesn't matter, but look at who's voting, what party they are in, what that party does, what's important for that party, and what the issues are. And look at the record of these people. What have they done? Okay. If they're new and they don't have much of a record, okay, look at the smaller record. But do that. Also, it's time for us to get off our duff. And it's easy now. And I know you do this, Bill. I do it all the time. In the old days, you had to write a letter. You had to mail it. You had to go to the post office. Now it's real easy. I get 20 emails a day, and I'm sure the average person does as well. Vote against this, or vote for this, or sign this petition, or do that, or do that. Make sure that you're out there signing these petitions. Make sure that your voice is heard in every way it can be heard. We have, in North Carolina, we lost one of our senators. Now he's the head of something in the government. And good riddance to him, but he belongs where he is with the crackpot who's in the White House. But we still have a Republican senator who I don't know much about. I mean, I know what his policies, so I don't know anything about personally, but I write to him all the time. And I complain and I bitch and I moan. And he writes back. His office does. I don't know if it's him, but it's his office. We've received this and so forth and so on and so on. Just keep doing that stuff until they hear it. I don't think this guy will ever hear it, but I don't care. Just keep nudging and pushing and pushing and pushing, because we're at a point now, we're at critical mass. We've got a society that's falling apart. We've got no leadership. We need to take it upon ourselves, as Bill has been saying. This is our country. We're here. This is our country. We live here. We pay taxes here. Many of us are born here. Some of us are not, but we still are here and involved in the political process. We need to take the power into the hands of the people and not leave it to someone else, some politician somewhere. That hasn't worked in 100 years, and it's never going to work. It's up to us to force the politicians and the power brokers to do what they need to do. I'll tell you something else about the polling, and I'll tell you a story that my sainted father told me 50 years ago. He said, people say one thing, and then when they get in the voting booth and pull that curtain closed, they very often vote the other way. They've been intimidated or peer pressure, or they wanted to say what was correct. But when they get in the booth, they pull the other lever. So polling means nothing. What means something is people taking this country back and voting for the person you think is the best person and convincing others of your community that this is what we need, and convincing them through something that this administration doesn't understand, facts. These are the facts. This is what this administration has done. And I don't want to get into a long thing. We've discussed it. You and I are both adamantly against this administration for 1,000 reasons. The point being here, again, power comes to those who seek and take it. And we need to seek and take it. And we need to be absolutely certain that what we're doing is pushing the line forward. We can't sit back and go, oh yeah, I gave $2 to her and I supported that. That's not the answer here. The answer is make sure you know what's happening. And also a very important word here, it's called listen. Listen to those who are speaking out, who know more than you. I know we all think we know everything. We know more than anybody else. We really don't. I was sent today by a very dear friend of mine who's an artist who lives in the City of the Angels, your old hometown. And she sent me a YouTube link to a woman called Kimberly Jones, who I did not know, and I don't know very much about the current culture. Looked like a young woman. I don't know. Maybe she's in her 30s. I couldn't tell. It was phenomenal. It was shocking. It was powerful. And I brought it up to you 2 minutes before we started this, and you go, "Oh yeah, yeah, it was amazing." So we both saw it. We both got it from different places. But I would suggest our listeners, our viewers, whatever we're doing today, audio or video or both, to look up Kimberly Jones on YouTube, because this is a phenomenal 6 minutes. I think it's off the cuff, maybe not. It may be scripted. It's very important to hear this because it's a history lesson.
In
If you're
6 minutes, it's not going to take you an hour-long
No,
seminar.
no, it's 6 minutes. This is someone you need to listen to. And you need to begin to read and look at things and see why these things occur. Why do we have this racism? Why do we have this power grab? Why do we have this greed? Why are people cut out? There are reasons for this stuff. It just doesn't happen. And we need to overcome those reasons with reason and fact and step forward. And we can do that. As you said, you know what? A man in 1848 by the name of Karl Marx said, you can have revolution in two countries, the United States of America and Great Britain, through the ballot box. The point being here, we can have revolution through the ballot box. No one's calling for violent revolution, at least I'm not, but we need to overthrow the powers that be, to put powers into what we need them to do to answer to the people, to all the people. But how much power do we really have? And that's the key. And by ourselves, none.
I think that might be where we disagree because, again, if it wasn't for one vote on the Supreme Court, Al Gore would be president. As a citizen, we have rights and we have a voice because all the people in power want to stay in power. We have the power to take them out. So they have to listen to us. They have to make sure. You mentioned that you write letters to your senator. Your senator responds. Somebody in his office responds.
He does.
They understand that if you take the time to send them a letter, you represent statistically maybe another 15 or 20 people who haven't taken the time, but they think just like you do. So they have to listen to you. And until we understand that, we can't, again, going back to Bradley and Duke-Majan, he lost to Duke-Majan. This is how close it was. Less than 2 votes per precinct statewide in California. Less than 2 votes per precinct. Bradley lost. That was the difference between winning and losing. And less than 50% of the eligible black voters voted. Now, I don't want to say that because Bradley is black, that black voters should have voted for him. But if more black voters would have voted, whatever that percentage is, he would have been governor and run one of the largest economies in the world and would have been able to release contracts that would have changed black business to this day. And this was in the 80s, 30 years
Early
ago.
80s. Yeah, early 80s.
So we have to understand the power of the vote. We're just one, but our one represents many. And when that one is added to that many, then changes happen. We can't assume that he's going to win anyway. So what's the point of me voting? I saw another number this morning that said only 50% of the eligible black voters voted the last time. And look what we ended up with. We cannot allow someone else to assume that one of the only powers that we have as American citizens, and that is our right to vote. If you're not registered, register. If you haven't studied what's going on, study. You have to participate. We may not, I'm saying this with all sincerity, because it's no guarantee that if the current administration in Washington gets reelected and doesn't have to face the voters again, there's no telling where he will take the country. He's already tried to take it places now, but if he gets reelected and Mitch McConnell gets reelected and the Republicans maintain control of the Senate, there's no telling what's going to happen to America in the next 4 years.
Unfortunately, I think there is telling, and I think it's going in a very bad direction.
Every time I think of not voting, I think about in my newspaper in my hometown, they ran a picture of the church that was bombed in Birmingham, and people were fighting for the right to vote. And 4 little girls were killed in that Sunday, and the pigtails and everything. Every time I think about not voting, that picture comes up in my head, and I'll get up off the couch and I'll go and do whatever's necessary. We cannot abdicate our power to someone else. It just cannot happen.
100% we agree. We do disagree on some things, which is kind of nice. I like to disagree with you because it's just fun. But get involved now. Start doing stuff today, tomorrow. Start learning about what's going on.
Let me jump in here. There was one other thing. There's a guy named Tim Wise, I think is his name, who's written a couple of books about white privilege and so forth. And he's been on CNN several times in the last couple of weeks during all of this racism talk. And one of the things that really stood out in my mind is that white people assume that if they get involved in something that they're going to be in charge. We laughed, but take the secondary role just to feel what that's like and to see how you can fit in to everything else. It sounds silly, but that's America. There's white privilege is real, and we can't ignore it. And he's saying that if white people want to do something, very simply, just surrender the power at something, and don't assume that when you walk into the room that everybody needs to listen to you because you have the most significant thing to say and to add to whatever the conversation is.
That's the society that we want to build. I think what we're trying to do here is build a society that really has at least parts of equality here, that sees color for a good thing, that sees different ethnic backgrounds as a good thing, that listens, that's involved with everybody, that creates a governing body that's representative of the country. We don't have that now. They don't want that now.
In fact, the president has said, Republicans have said, that we'll lose if vote is large. So through gerrymandering, they've managed to change the way districts vote, and through changes in laws, they've managed to suppress the vote of many people. So understand what's going on, understand voter suppression, but you still have, if you are eligible to vote, if you are registered to vote, you have the right to vote, and take that right.
Amen, Bill. I couldn't agree with you more, Bill. I couldn't agree with you more. I just want to say one thing, which is way off topic, but I have no concentration, nor do I have any memory. We call this show Social Studies Voices Across America simply because we were involved in social issues, and you lived on one coast and I lived on the other coast, which was fine. But now that you live about 6 hours from here and I live 7 hours from the coast, I think we have to change the name to Social Studies Voices Within America, because we're no longer across America. It's still us.
I
did
think about that once, and yeah, that's real.
Take action. People in the streets are taking action. Most of them are peaceful protesters who need to be out there. Good for them. All power to them. Those of us who are not in the streets, we were a little frightened of the pandemic. Fine. There are things you can do every day. Every day. Learn stuff. Write letters. Write emails. Read. Listen. And when the time comes, make sure you walk into the voting booth, because it's your voting booth, and push the right levers, man. And let's build something here, you know?
The one thing about democracy is that it tends to be mob rule. We can't even allow the mob to tell us how to vote this time. Our vote is so important, and we found out that a lot of the mob action was actually controlled by the alt-right instead of the alt-left. So we have to vote for ourselves and know who and what we're voting for, and vote. Peter, it's been great to get back together, dude.
It has, my good friend. It really
Good
has.
to see you again.
You too, brother.
To those who are listening, till we come together again, take care of each other and respect each other.
Peace.
You can get this podcast. You can tell someone else about this podcast. It's available through YouTube, through iTunes, and through Google Play. Let's hear from you. Let us know what you think so that we can be in community with you. And there is a way to contact us. That's at peter@agnetuslife.com or bill@agnetuslife.com. That's our email addresses. Let's hear from you. Let's open up the forum.